The family began verbally attacking him, and it all went downhill from there. Trust me, it was very difficult. It was bad. I didn't know what was going on. They confronted him with the names of men he had visited in the area, 4 of whom he had slept with. They know so much about it. When they asked me, I didn't deny. I was shocked, and it was very embarrassing to me. I was 22, very young and beautiful. They were so mad at me, hating me. They called me names. Banza, it's like outcast. But his humiliation didn't end there. Admitting was one thing, but refusing to change his ways was a whole other drama. They asked me to stop, and I shouldn't be gay. I said, I can't change my sexuality. I can't be straight. I can't be normal. It is who I am. Since the shaming was not enough, they then told his father, who hadn't initially been present, and then all hell really broke loose. His father fetched his dagger and tried to cut Aziz. Aziz ran from room to room to avoid being stabbed, and that was the end of him living in the home he'd grown up in. His father chased him out. As if that was not enough, his father then burned all my stuff, my clothes, my documents, my high school papers, everything. Aziz was taken in by a maternal aunt who lived nearby. In Nima, quarters are so tight and he knew nowhere else to go further afield. More cripplingly, he was left with no proof of education or even identity. He had to start all over again. Father and son have not spoken in over 6 years. He's nearby, but he doesn't want to see me. He despises me, as he says, in that matter-of-fact way that says either he's coming to terms with rejection or is pushing down deep pain. He hates me. During this time, his mother passed away. Aziz is certain that he's not the only gay one in the family, just the one who had the misfortune to be exposed. I have cousins who I know are gay. It's very difficult. His maternal aunt, the one he lived with, continually asked him to pray and also to try to make overtures to his father, as do his sisters who live in Germany. These women are the few family members he had been on reasonably good terms with. His skin has grown thicker in the passing years. He is no less gay and is defiant with extended family members and with strangers. His focus is on success in his chosen career, modeling and acting. Everyone in my family knows, and it's not everyone I talk to. You can't confront me and ask me because now I'm very rude and harsh. Yes, I am. I wouldn't tolerate it. I don't take nonsense. He speaks to some of his brothers, but they don't accept him. His work in commercials is seen as a gateway to homosexuality and is not lauded as a worthy career choice. While he's let go of the fear, the hurt lingers and anger has crept in. He has no plans to make up with his father because he's still furious with him. Most recently, he'd been in a relationship with a man who was supposedly heterosexual and had girlfriends. Aziz claimed he loved the sex and pretended to be the man's buddy to keep it going. I think he craved the intimacy far more than the sex and would take it in any form he could get it. The relationship cracked when the boyfriend, despite being straight, began getting jealous and accused Aziz of cheating on him with other men. Aziz ended up seeking asylum in the United States and starting his life all over again. And one of the reasons why I talk a lot about Aziz's story is that he is an example of a flood of talent, African talent, who, because of social conditioning and families deciding we don't want to deal with this, have ended up in the United States, the United Kingdom, all over Europe and Asia, trying to start again and have a new life, and building up Western nations when their talents could be used here.
I think that's a very relevant story you shared, and how you've even just couched it. First of all, let me say Lives of Great Men was such a...
That really saddened me as I was doing the research for this book was that I was interviewing people across the strata, whether you are very well educated or you have less formal education, whether you were somebody who was a professional class or you were not. And there was a group of people who had, there was a time when people, I think if you live abroad and you sort of hit 40 or 45, you start thinking about all the things that you've learned in your career and all the degrees and all the education that you've had. And you start thinking about how you can use that to make a difference at home. And there's this cluster of people that I talked to who had moved back to Ghana and had been very highly skilled, very highly successful people. And by the way, this is not just the Ghana portion. I saw this repeated in Botswana, in South Africa, and in Nigeria. People had come home, had started working, and when you've lived a certain kind of life and you're of a certain age, if you're in your 50s, it's rather difficult to come home to Ghana and be forced to go back into the closet and have this sort of full heterosexual marriage for business purposes. It's really difficult for some people. So what I saw was that there was a cluster of these men who decided that, it's just too difficult to be here in Ghana. And they left. On the other hand, I have, close friends who decided it was time to come home, and they came home, and they conformed. They would get married, they would have children, and they would continue seeing someone of the same gender on the side. So I have moved past the point of making judgments about this. As a journalist and as a reporter, I just say this is what is happening out there. But one thing that is a common thread with all of these things is that people who are not just different, not just queer, but have the audacity to be open about it are always a target. I don't think in Nigeria the SARS protest protesters would even attack the gay people among them if the gay people were not fierce enough to hold signs and to have these outward expressions of their sexuality. And that is a thing that kind of audacity and that kind of brilliance, to be able to just put it out there that this is who I am under any circumstance, it's grating to some people. It makes people, and they feel like, even people who feel like, well, I don't have anything against anybody, for some of them, there's just something that makes them, I don't know if it's because they can't be like that, or there's just something about being out and proud that angers some people so much that they turn to violence. Gay people and queer people and women have known about the brute force of SARS for a very long time, the brute force of the police for a very long time. So to now have them, someone or some people try to marginalize them for this fight they've been having for years. I give you a recent example. I think this morning it was announced that some people of the police force, high-ranking people, have been dismissed. And one of them was the public relations spokesperson. I think her name is Dolapo Badnos, but I'm not sure. But she was very famous for telling all these LGBTQ people in Nigeria, as fabulous as they are, that they needed to pack and leave. Can you imagine the balls it takes for someone to tell people in their own country that they all need to pack their bags and leave their country? That as if this Africa is only for certain kinds of people. And there was no repercussion. There was a little bit of a ho-hum on TV. It was on CNN that it was picked up that there's actually a Nigerian police officer telling Nigerians who can live and who cannot be in the country. And then it was forgotten about. But what that did was to mask and embolden her to continue her human rights violations against all kinds of other people because there was no consequence. And so today, when she is being fired for all of her human rights violations, queer people remember, they say, okay, you guys are sorry that she's being fired, she did this. Remember 3 years ago when she told all of us to just pack our bags and move? So there is a certain kind of a situation we find ourselves on our continent where it's okay to punch down, not to punch among your weight. It's okay to attack a group of people who you feel are smaller in society and have no power.
I think you raise a conversation then on how we all understand oppression.
You cannot have freedom for yourself if other people are not free. If you have to be a woman who gets married in order to have a promotion, that is not freedom. Doesn't matter what the culture says that you must be married to do X, Y, and Z. And you can't just be free to be you. So you have to think about it. I mean, there are some places on our continent where people who are albino are just targeted. You know, I think one of Ghana's great journalists, Anas Armia Anas, did a whole expose across East Africa about how people were killing albino people for meat and juju. I mean, it sounds ludicrous, but this happens. So if you're asking for freedom for yourself, whatever that self is, you have to know that it cannot come at the cost of someone else. And you can't say, and this is a problem that I had with, you know, one of our huge senators in Nigeria, who was one of the few women in the legislative house, and she was constantly demonized by men, her colleagues, you know, at the floor of the, you know, what you would call the parliament here, we call it the Senate, people would tell her they would rape her if she didn't, you know, it was just ugly stuff. And she would cry out and say, you know, this is just awful, awful anti-women stuff. Yet, the same woman who is now looking for help was one of the people beating the drumbeat for criminalizing and putting gay people in jail for 14 years. You can't have it both ways. If you're going to be a fighter for equality and a fighter for freedom, then you have to be a fighter for everybody else. You know, you can't just be a fighter for the person that is your friend or your own narrow interest. And so when I think about people who are truly, truly, truly fighting for people, you know, people like Archbishop Desmond Tutu, who has spent his life fighting for people on the African continent, it is not an exclusionary business. It is a big tent, and if someone is an African and is on this continent and lives here or even has roots here, you cannot tell them that they are less than you for whatever reason that is.
Thank you so much for that. I want us to bring the conversation.
Just a couple of months ago, finished reading this book called Embracing My Shadow. It's a memoir of coming out as a lesbian and growing up as a lesbian in Nigeria by this wonderful professor named Unomazwa. And I had the opportunity to talk to her about her experiences as you know, a woman of a certain age in Nigeria. And then also while I was doing the research for Lives of Great Men, I did happen to talk to a bunch of women. Women are not centered in my book because I feel like I didn't have enough knowledge to write about lesbian women, but the few friends I had, I did talk to them. And there are certain things that make me say, okay, you know what, women who are married to men and have girlfriends who are also married or not, we are in a society where I don't know what the exact statistics are, but men probably make 10 to 15 times more than women. Maybe even 20 times in our society. And that is just a fact. Men make more money, men get promoted, men get everything. And very often there will be a woman who breaks through. But I don't believe, and I don't think this is something that can be disputed, that in this society where we are, we don't have pay equity. You know? So many women have these marriages where it comes with someone actually taking care of you financially and providing everything that you need, right? And one lesbian told me that I don't have any problem with my girlfriend going home to her husband because who do you think is paying for all this? You know? So the woman who is married is getting from the husband to take care of her and whatever situation she has. So it's different for women because one, you just can't simply step out on your own and make it so easily. So if you have to get married, because this is the thing with men get married for all kinds of pressure and all of that, but I really believe the pressure on women is even greater to have a husband, you know, greater than to be somebody's wife in our society is quite an honor that many people get married and find love outside. So for women, where it's even tougher, where also I believe that women's sexuality is not looked at the same way. It's almost as if women who sleep with other women are just sort of playing around. Yeah. And eventually they'll find a nice guy who has a nice dick and they'll get married and have children and blah, 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 blah. Our society is so centered on maleness and male heterosexuality that women's sexuality is just like, yeah, you know, they're doing whatever and she's playing with her friend and she'll come back home at some point. So I cannot be judgmental of that, but as a person who is trying to look at our society and hold the mirror up to us, I have to be able to say, look at what is happening with these women. Some of them are actually quite happy being married. You know, we can't just judge them and say the women who are out lesbians and trying to make it are in a better position, because you just don't know.
Thank you for that. I could talk to you forever.
Yeah.
But let me open the question board. Anyone with questions, please just put up your hand. And okay, so we have a question here. Is there a mic going?
Things last forever, and then modern people are now saying this is the way it's supposed to be. One of the things that was used to put them down was that it was a minuscule minority, like it's just this tiny sliver of people that are LGBTQ+. And since it's such a small group of people, why bother? And we know the reality is that it is a minuscule minority of maybe what you know, because the society does not let people to be their authentic selves. And so when people actually, and I don't often like this expression, but when people step out of the cocoon of hiding and they're living their authentic selves, even if there is absolutely nothing that you can do to change the laws, what you're doing is changing the hearts and minds of the people around you. So that when people talk about, you know, lesbians do this, or gay men do that, or bisexuals don't really exist, or da-da-da-da-da, you know, people can stand up and say, well, you know, that's not the experience I have with my friends, my children, my cousins, my da-da-da-da-da. So in that sense, there is a little bit of an improvement. And if we're looking in the legal sense, there have been more countries on our continent that have decriminalized homosexuality than not. Certainly, the big noisy ones, you know, like Nigeria and Ghana and a few others, you know, have not. But that is not representative of the entire continent, or even our West African ECOWAS region.
I think it would be great if we can talk about, you talk a lot about
So if you're following, it's page 138 at the bottom of the page. Despite the recent uprush of homophobic prejudice, often clothed in notions that homosexuality is un-African, folks with different sexual orientations have always existed in sub-Saharan communities, sub-Saharan African communities, whether they were known as Gorgijans, man-woman in Senegal, or Kobla Mesia in Ghana, or Dench/Yandaudu, the headscarf-wearing feminine men of northern Nigeria. The frequent complaint from homophobes in African countries is that it is not in our culture. Has always surprised me because it is simply wrong. Most often they explain their reasoning by turning to biblical or Quranic texts. But the Bible and the Quran aren't native to Africa, nor are they factual documents. In Nigeria, we have a history of celebrating differences and accepting circumstances that may seem unusual. Case in point is the Yoruba deity Shango, the god of thunder and lightning, and an Alaafin, king of Oyo, a macho personage who had at least 3 wives. Legend has it that he once borrowed clothes from one of his wives to escape his enemies, and today he's sometimes depicted with his hair long and plaited and wearing a skirt. No one would think of branding him a cross-dresser, but in this era of labeling yourself gay or something different, it is a mark for trouble. It's a marker for trouble. In the 1970s, my homeland had her own gender-bending musical star, a singer who went by the moniker Area Scatter. Scatter wore makeup, plaited his hair, and dressed as a glamorous lady, played the thumb piano for Igbo royalty far and wide. It's been said that he told people after living through the brutal Nigerian Civil War of 1967 to 1970, a conflict that saw over 100,000 military casualties and an estimated 2 million civilians dead from starvation, he went into the forest. When Scatter emerged 7 years later, 7 months and 7 days later, it was as a quote-unquote woman. Was he a gay man? Was he a transgender woman? Did it even matter? And it's not just in Nigeria. Across Africa, there is a rising discomfort with anyone claiming and owning their sexuality if it doesn't conform to the ways of the life of the majority and fall in line with whatever Abrahamic religion is predominant. I remember Area Scatter and seeing the videos of him, which are still available today. This is a man who was married with children, and something happened obviously during the Biafran War many things happened. But he disappeared for a while and re-emerged and was living and performing for the highest strata in our society. He was a musician and he played music and everybody loved him and he walked around the streets freely and nobody gawked at him. Nobody said, why? Era where we put everything out there on social media, that I'm still catching up and things still surprise me what people share about themselves. But I thought, I'm not going to give you a work that is billed as a memoir and then not be honest about it. And so that part was a bit hard in the beginning because I wasn't used to. But then, you know, you're doing a memoir. Give the people an honest portrayal of your life. And so I had to talk about my love stories and my attempts at love and my, you know, places where I had fallen down flat on my face, because that is an honest portrayal of me. You know, I may have succeeded at something, but you never, well, not for me anyway, I never start at the top. I have to climb, and sometimes I fall a little bit, and then when I get there. So the person that you see in front of you that may have evolved somewhat didn't just come out that way. There was a journey to that, and so documenting that was interesting.
It meant you had to go through a lot of like self-reflection, right? Especially in your relationships, there are ways things would end and you would always blame a person in a specific way. Yeah. But one thing that stood out for me in how you wrote about at least your personal relationships was there wasn't
that fucking asshole. You know, I'm glad you're gone and, you know, whatever. But I think that in looking back, many, many years ago, I read this book by an American author called Marianne Williamson. And the title of the book is called A Return to Love. I mean, she's gone on to do many things. And, you know, she ran for president and she's a little bit, you know, her ideas today are a little bit sort of like left of center. So she's kind of like weird like me. But this was when, you know, 20, 30 years ago that she wrote this book. And that book, A Return to Love, was really about taking personal responsibility. So, you know, if you went on a bad date and it was just awful, you know, and instead of blaming the other person for giving you such a horrible time, you know, she would ask the question, but why did you give them your number? You know, and it was sort of like, when I was writing this, I had to think very clearly about what was my role in all of these problems. You know, certain things you can't, you know, you cannot control other people's actions, and there are some people who are just bad people. That's just the way it is. There's some people who are terrible at relationships. There's some people who are terrible at, they're terrible friends. There's some people who are takers. But in all of that stuff, you know, yes, they have their own stuff that's going on with them. But then it's like, for me, it's like, well, what was my role in this?
So what did you discover about you?
That, you know, I've been patient in many situations longer than I should have been. I recognize that. You know, I mean, if you're in a shitty relationship and you stay in it, that's on you. So a lot of those things were on me. And I recognize that at a stage where, you know, my happiness, my health, mental health, and all of those things, you know, they're just as important to me as whoever it is that's in my world. And if I don't take care of myself, and if I'm not happy, then I cannot give my best self to the people that are around me. So part of that is recognizing that even you have not always done things the way they should have been done. And you have to take responsibility for it, and you have to own up for it. And when you do the wrong thing, if you care about the people that you did the wrong thing to, actually, even if you don't care about them, you ought to apologize and leave things on, you know, and I have a relative who married a woman who is a homophobe. There's no other way to put it. And you know, at a family function, she was extremely rude to me, and I in the beginning I couldn't figure out why until it became crystal clear. And she tried to shame me for not having a wife, and I was like, I don't understand. I have a partner. Why are you trying to, create drama when I have somebody that I've had for years, you know. But it's, I think one of the things that I personally do is that if you're in my space, whether you're a relative or not, or you're an in-law or not, and you bring this kind of mess to me, and you expect, and this is sort of like the Nigerian or West African thing, that, well, we're in front of people, so he's going to back down when I shame him. And you know, what that does to me is to just, you know, to share even more and tell you how me and my partner are doing X, Y, and Z, and how we've done this and how we've done that, and just like, you know, take away your ability to try to shame me, because it's late. I mean, I think if I was 20, it'd be different. I might cower. I might go into a shell. I might not come out. You know, but when I hit 40, that was like, take it or leave it. And I was in a position to be able to do that, because at 40, I think I was, you know, I was feeling myself. I thought I was ultra fabulous and this and this and that. And now I know that I'm just regular. But at the time, I had this whole thing that, you know, if you don't want me in your life, fuck off. I got all these other wonderful people. And so it's not for everyone. But I think that representation matters, and being able to be your authentic self matters, even in the face of people flinging things at you who are in your family. I mean, I think about Aziz going to the United States, a person who comes from a very large family here, where he had cousins, brothers, everything. And people don't understand the trauma it is to start your life in a whole new place. At 20-something, experiencing winter for the first time. When you're seeking asylum, you don't have permission to work. I mean, we didn't really get into the story that much, but it's like, you go to a new country, you ask for asylum, you can't work, you're just sitting, waiting, and the people who are hosting you are saying, when are you going to get your papers and start paying rent here? We're not responsible for you. I mean, these are just human emotions, and the indignity of leaving a solid middle-class life here in Africa, going abroad, and having to do all kinds of things just to survive until you get your papers to work. And then you do get your papers to work, and then you realize that your degree from, you know, wherever means nothing over there. So the only thing you're qualified to do is to maybe take a menial job. Starting over at a certain age is not exactly easy. I'm assuming you're talking about here in Africa.
Yeah.
I'm assuming not in the Western world. So the book here in Ghana, Nigeria, and all over West Africa, the book is published by a wonderful publishing house called Wieder Books out of Lagos, Nigeria. In Southern Africa, it's published by a wonderful company called Jakana Media. Lives of Great Men, I think when people have read it or engaged with it, it's touched them in a way that wherever I've gone to do a reading, whether it's Johannesburg or Abuja or Lagos, I think when people have engaged with the book, they have showered me with love. I think it's, there have been obviously some roadblocks. I think there are some people who didn't want to cover it, didn't want to review it when it came out. Some publications and stations didn't want to touch it when it came out. Some bookstores didn't want to carry it, but in the years that it's been out, I mean, it came out in 2018, you know, and there's a validation that comes with people actually showing up when I show up to read from it and talk about it. And Nigerians have been wonderful with this book. I mean, the last time I was in Lagos, I flew into the airport, and, you know, this man just walked up to me and said, "I've just finished your book. Can I help you get through customs?" He worked at the airport. And I said, "Sure." Because if you've ever been to the Lagos airport, it's really like, it's manic, you know. I said, "Sure, you can help me, and I'll sign your book when I'm leaving the country." But it's one of those things where people have engaged with it and have felt that what I did had allowed them to have the language to communicate with people like them or who are different from them. And so I think that, you know, people buy it in Nigeria still. I'm happy, and I was a bit disappointed in the beginning when, you know, some bookstores wouldn't carry it and I wouldn't get any press for it. But the reality is that quietly, when no one's looking, people have gone and ordered the book to be delivered to them at home. People have read it, people have been intimate with it, and people have written me. And one of the most type of letters or emails that I get from this book is really about people saying, you know, thank you for showing these lives and giving us a way to sort of engage with this. So I feel like the work has done its job in a sense.
I think that's a great way to wrap up this. I want to wrap this up with a quote.
I went to boarding school in Port Harcourt and River State in Nigeria, and I think those people who went to federal government colleges, they were called unity schools at the time. We all had principals who tried to make sure that we left a mark once we left school. And I was thinking about it as I was writing this book, that some of these men and women in the book have really, in their own little way, left their footprints on the sands of time around.